This, this presentation will be about Canadian Occupational Performance Measure. This assessment was created by occupational therapists in all areas, including clinical practice, administration, education and research, and all specialty areas such as pediatrics, adults, physical dysfunction, and mental health. These occupational therapists saw that the previous measurement had limitations. One limitation was that it did not take into account the importance of role expectations and environmental factors. A second limitation was that the previous instruments did not measure functional performance, but instead only focused on performance components. The Canadian Occupational Performance Measure now focused on the individual task instead of what went into the task. The therapists looked at existing measures to find what might work and what might make them better. After looking at this, they found what they wanted, and they wanted the new measure to be client-based. A semi-structured interview seemed to be the best way to do this. Through having a semi-structured interview, the assessment was still able to be standardized, as well as make sure that they would get to know the client and be able to understand why they were having difficulty. And for this reason, the measurement works for most populations. They also wanted it to reflect the philosophy model of occupational performance. After working to develop a new assessment, the therapists came up with the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, or the Copm. This measurement detects daily living activities that the client feels that they need to work on. Then they find the 5 most important tasks to the client, and we will talk about how they find those later on in this presentation. This assessment has no limit to the population. If using this assessment on younger children or clients who can't communicate well, then you are able to adapt it, and the parents or caregivers can answer the questions. The Copm encompasses the areas of self-care, productivity, and leisure. After finding areas the client has trouble with, the specialist can then ask different questions to gain a better understanding of why the task is difficult. Reliability and validity. Because this assessment is used for so many populations, it's important to remember to group samples before testing for reliability and validity. And because the assessment is semi-structured, the interview, it can also be standardized. You can ask the same questions, but then you can go in more depth each time. It has good intra-class reliability for a 0.67 performance and a 0.69 for satisfaction. Validity to test for criterion validity, they decided to use the health assessment questionnaire. They had questions and scores that were relatable. Construct validity used the idea that those who don't know how to do something that they want to know how to do tend to have higher anxiety. For the administration of this test, it must be purchased. If a specialist has never used the assessment before, they should pay the $22.45 so that they can see the step-by-step process of the assessment being given. If they have used it before, then they can just pay the $52.45 to get the manual and the forms. Once the specialist has gotten the assessment, it is important for them to review it and make sure that they understand it. If the specialist does not understand it, how is the client supposed to feel confident in the results? In the next slides, we will talk about each of the 5 steps that are in the assessment. Step 1, problem definition. The first step includes getting to know your client through the semi-structured interview. During this interview, the specialist will list activities in the categories of self-care, productivity, and leisure. The client is then asked if he or she needs to perform, wants to perform, or is expected to perform. If he or she answers yes to any of these, Then the task is added to a list. Next, we go to step 2, the problem weighing. This is when the specialist takes the list from step 1 and has the client rate the importance of the task on a scale of 1 to 10. Step 3, you will take the 5 most important tasks from step 2 and now have the client rate those tasks on the ability to perform and also have them rate them on the satisfaction. After all the rating is done, you're going to multiply each number by the importance of the task. At the end, you should have 2 numbers for each task. This will give you a baseline, which will be needed later. This is also the step where the short-term goals are set and the therapy plan is made. Step 4, reassessment. After implementing the plan and when the specialist feels it is time, they will reassess. They will have the client repeat step 3 and this time multiply the new scores by the original importance. That way they can compare to the baseline score. Step 5, the follow-up. In this final step, the specialist and the client will decide what comes next. Does the client need to stay in treatment and work on the 5 tasks that they chose before? Has the client accomplished what he or she wants to? Are there new difficulties that have come up? So for this assessment, the agency that I could apply this to is the Work Activity Center. This is a center where adults with disabilities go and they have programs during the day, and they also have some programs where the clients work. So this assessment could be used in planning who goes in what program. You want similar abilities and similar goals in the same program. That way it's not so scattered. It can also be used to help plan activities. If you know what daily living activities clients are having troubles with or that they want to improve on, then it's easier to plan activities instead of just trying to think of ones. Then also, it can help decide on goals for the clients. Each of the clients have goals, and at the end of the day, we're supposed to write how they improved or how they at least worked towards their goal. And so by using this assessment, the goals are more realistic, and then we can also figure out how to get to them. And that is the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure assessment.